It was summer of 1776 when representatives from the 13 American colonies declared their independence from Great Britain. The story of the United States was just beginning, and more than 2,000 miles away, Tucson's story was beginning too, in an unexpected place.
Tucson's story starts in Tubac because the Spanish came up from the south, so there was a whole series of frontiers, if you will. There was one just above Mexico City for a while, and then it made it all the way up to Durango, and then it made its way up to El Paso, which is kind of our region here. So following east-west from El Paso, this was the frontier. And the purpose of the frontier and having these presidios all along here was that it was providing protection for the main silver mining areas of Mexico, which was the cash cow for Spain.
In 1775, an Irishman named Hugo O'Connor was tasked with inspecting all the presidios from Louisiana to California. So he came to Tubac, which had a presidio fortress, didn't like what he saw, and then he came north to Tucson, which was a Native American village, and decided this would be a great place to build a new fort.
The word had come down that this presidio was to be closed and that the soldiers were to move with their families to Tucson. It must have been wrenching because they had made a home here, children had been born here and things like that. People then have to be a bit like we are, where you don't like change.
When the soldiers and their families arrived in Tucson, they found a brand new fort, unfinished and ill-equipped.
It must have been short of housing and short of food and short of supplies for a long time. So it took some time to get up to speed, and so it probably was no picnic.
It would be grim at best. And I'm sure people were thinking at the time, how did I ever get out here? Because this is really the end of the world. The first thing, any strategy for them to survive out here since they moved up from Tubac was to get some kind of roof over their head. So they would probably set up some type of ramada to get the heat off whatever encampments they had, and they would probably use the mesquite trees, the beams from that, and then other cross members or anything to build a ramada, and then typically maybe even have some kind of fireplace and chimney for the winter for heat. So you had to get yourself protected from the elements.
For guidance, these new residents occasionally turned to more experienced Tucsonans.
Over at the base of Sentinel Peak, or which now is called A Mountain, was the mission of San Augustin, and there were several hundred O'odham and Pima people living there. And they were a farming community, and then during the hot months they might go off somewhere else to go hunting or gathering wild foods, the materials they needed to make baskets, that sort of thing.
Eventually, the newcomers settled into a routine.
The soldiers had a variety of tasks. They would go out on expeditions looking to see what was going. They would work on building the fort. They would be guarding the horse and cattle herds from the Apache, who liked to visit and borrow a few of those animals every now and then. The women who were here would be washing the clothes down in the canal at the base of the terrace and helping to raise the kids, cooking, grinding corn and wheat on the manos and metates. It was a hard life, but for whatever reason, people stayed here.
With life centered on survival, politics weren't a priority.
In 1776, there probably wasn't a lot of news trickling in about what was happening in the American colonies. Spain was a traditional enemy of England, so if they heard anything, they would say, oh, well, that's great, because we don't like them. It wasn't until the 1780s that better information about the American Revolution occurred. And they actually raised money here in Tucson to give to the American people to help fight the British.
More than 2 centuries later, the U.S. is a dramatically different place, and so is southern Arizona.
If you look at where the Santa Cruz is today and all the development, people can forget there was a reason why people settled here and have lived along the Santa Cruz for 4,000 years. Surface flow of water, landscape. In fact, in Father Kino's diary, he talks about in the 1690s that when the birds would fly off the trees in the Santa Cruz riparian area, the sky would darken. This was a lush oasis in the desert, and that's why every group has stopped here and why there were so many contests and conflicts here, because it was a desirable place.